Welcome to the Feminist Park podcast. I'm Kwame.
And I'm Leilani. It's great to be kicking off this journey with you all today.
Yeah, we're diving into work that's really closely tied to the vision behind the Feminist Park project, which was founded by Hussein Stuck.
That project's goal is pretty ambitious, isn't it? Imagining these truly equitable public spaces, starting with the idea for an intersectional feminist park right here in Berlin.
Exactly. And this podcast, well, it's kind of an extension of that. We're going to be digging into the academic research that, supports and informs that kind of vision.
We'll be taking these dense, sometimes quite academic papers and really pulling out the core and insights.
And looking at them through specific lenses, things like environmental justice, intersectionality, anti-colonial thought, queer theory.
All the stuff that helps us think critically about space.
So for our first deep dive, we're actually starting with some background research that Hussein came across early on. And it highlighted something, well, frankly, quite jarring. That the benefits we think we all get from urban green spaces, parks and squares and things like physical and mental well-being, they're often deeply gendered.
Meaning women and also gender-diverse people, they just don't get the same access or experience those benefits in the same way men do.
Right. Less equitable access, fewer benefits. It seems almost counterintuitive, doesn't it? A park is just a park, open to everyone.
The simple act of accessing nature in a city, that sense of peace, the chance for recreation, the positive mental health boosts, these aren't equally distributed. It's quite stark, actually. What this means, quite simply, is that women, on the whole, have less access to these really crucial benefits than men do. There's a key quote here from Fernandez, Nunez, and others in a pivotal 2022 paper, a core source for this project. They state, and I'm quoting directly, while men are well catered for in these spaces, example in terms of safety and accessibility, women are often left out in their own needs and preferences. Some parks, because of their amenities, features, and design, are seemingly more oriented to men's needs and preferences, thus being more used by men than women, end quote.
That's a really powerful statement, almost unsettling,
Wow.
because it forces you to completely rethink a space you might consider totally neutral, right? Like a simple city park. It makes you wonder how something seemingly so universal could be designed with such an inherent bias baked in.
Absolutely challenges those assumptions. And what's even more critical here, what this really highlights, is this glaring research gap. The persistent lack of disaggregated data by gender in studies on urban green spaces.
So we just don't have the numbers broken down.
Often, no. We talk about accessibility, we talk about usage patterns, but frequently the underlying data isn't broken down by gender or by other crucial intersecting identities like race or ability or class. And this isn't just, a statistical oversight. It's a profound societal blind spot.
Right.
It means we're building cities, we're designing parks, allocating resources without a clear picture of how different groups are actually experiencing these spaces. And this lack of data, it's directly linked to these deeply ingrained, unequal power structures woven into the very fabric of our cities.
If you don't measure it, you can't fix it.
Exactly. If we don't measure how different genders or different racial groups or people with different abilities experience these spaces, we simply cannot address the disparities effectively. And this problem, it's becoming more and more urgent in our world today. With cities growing so rapidly all over the globe, the need for accessible green space is intensifying. But these very growth patterns often underscore and sometimes even worsen existing inequalities. Inequalities that affect everyone, really, not just women.
Okay, so it's not just about pointing fingers or listing what's broken or missing, which is important, but what feels genuinely inspiring here is that this proposed podcast and the project behind it isn't just observing these profound problems, it's also actively trying to identify solutions, uncover opportunities. This isn't merely about fairness for women, though that's crucial. It seems like it's about unlocking a much broader societal benefit that touches everyone.
That's a key takeaway.
We'll explore how tackling this gap could lead to a fundamental rethink of urban design. Reclaiming public spaces so they're truly welcoming, truly functional for all. It's about optimizing public health, community-wide, fostering genuinely inclusive communities that actually reflect the diversity of the people living there. So in this deep dive, our mission is to look at the foundational academic work that informs all these ideas, give you the context, the insights you need. A lot of what we'll discuss today actually draws from a significant collection of student papers from the University of Winnipeg's Women and Urban Environments course, published way back in 1997.
Yeah, it shows these ideas have been around for a while.
Exactly. It gives us historical context, reveals just how long these critical issues have been discussed, debated, and how persistent they still are. All right, let's start to unpack this. Our core sources, as you said, stem from that course. And it lays out some really fundamental premises about how we understand cities, how we interact with them. These aren't just like abstract academic theories floating around. They're the foundational lens, the way we can start to see our urban environments in a totally new light.
Indeed. Ann Beavis, who edited the volume we're drawing from, she outlines 4 core ideas, absolutely central to understanding cities from a feminist perspective. And these are, as you can probably guess, highly relevant to the ambitious goals of the Feminist Park project.
Hmm.
The first premise, and maybe the most fundamental one, is this. Cities are experienced differently by women than by men. Now, this isn't just anecdote, it's not just personal preference, it's a foundational academic premise, and it profoundly impacts how we should think about urban design, planning, policy, everything.
Okay, differently how? Can you give an example?
Sure. Imagine walking through your own neighborhood. Do you feel completely safe at all times? Do you have easy access to everything you need? Groceries, childcare, transit stops. For many women, the answers to those questions can be starkly different than for men, even in the exact same physical space, at different times of day, especially.
That immediately makes me think about how many times I've walked down a street or through a park and just assumed everyone else was experiencing it the exact same way I was. This really challenges that assumption.
Precisely. It forces us to question that default male perspective. And the second premise builds directly on that. It argues that cities have historically been constructed by men and largely for men.
What does that mean in practice, like concrete examples?
It means the very blueprints, the zoning laws, the infrastructure decisions where services are placed.
Yeah.
They've often been shaped by a male-centric rhythm of life, commuting patterns, recreational preferences, and this implicitly excludes or limits women's activities and movements, sometimes in subtle ways, sometimes not so subtle.
Like public transport routes.
Exactly. Think about routes designed primarily for 9 to 5 peak commuter hours, heading straight downtown to office districts. That doesn't necessarily serve the diverse, often multi-stop journeys. Many women make childcare drop-offs, errands, part-time jobs spread out across the city. That trip-chaining pattern.
Or parks.
Or parks designed with huge open fields, great for organized sports, often dominated by men, but maybe lacking safe, well-lit pathways. Or playgrounds without clear sightlines, which is crucial for a parent watching a child.
Right. And yet women have always been a massive part of city life, shaping communities, raising families, contributing to culture. So what about their contributions? The women who lived in and influenced these cities, maybe without formal recognition.
That leads right to the third premise. The crucial importance of recognizing, remembering, women's significant yet way too often overlooked contributions. Yeah. Contributions to urban history, design, culture. Everything, from the informal networks that held neighborhoods together to tireless community organizing, women have consistently played a vital foundational role. Yet their stories, their innovations, their influence, frequently erased, minimized, just forgotten in the official histories.
Okay. And the fourth premise, you said it was maybe more speculative.
Yeah, the fourth one is speculative, but incredibly powerful as a thought experiment. It's the idea that a city designed by women would be fundamentally, maybe even radically different from the ones we live in now.
Different how? What would be the priorities?
Well, that's the question it forces us to ask. It isn't saying men can't design inclusive cities, of course not. But it's a theoretical frame. It gives us a clear lens to view something like the Feminist Park project, positioning it as a tangible, concrete step towards creating that alternative urban vision. A space built from different assumptions, different priorities. Safety, care, accessibility, maybe connection to nature.
Okay, so if we pull all these premises together, it sounds like the focus of this kind of research, and by extension the Feminist Park podcast, is explicitly feminist and woman-centered. Is that fair?
Precisely. It zeroes in on issues that are specific to or disproportionately affect women. Things like childcare access, safe and affordable housing, urban safety, and the pervasive threat of violence, domestic violence, sexual assault in public spaces. But crucially, it doesn't stop there. It also critiques the broader systemic structures and institutions that marginalize women, and significantly, other human and non-human beings. This broader scope is where ecofeminism really enters the picture.
Ah, ecofeminism. Okay.
Yeah. It recognizes that the oppression and marginalization of women often mirrors and is deeply interconnected with the oppression and degradation of nature itself.
That's a really fascinating intersection. Can you unpack that ecofeminist lens a bit more? It sounds like it challenges some really fundamental ways we perceive the world, like basic categories we use.
It absolutely does. Ecofeminism asks us to challenge a fundamental way we've been taught to think. especially in Western society, this idea that everything has to be an either, a binary. It's an approach to environmental ethics that tries to integrate what it calls false dichotomies, these ideas that deeply underpin Western post-Enlightenment thought. Think about it, male or female, physical or spiritual, ideal or real, even city versus nature.
Right, we see those divisions everywhere.
Everywhere. Ecofeminism argues that these eitherers are actually binary oppositions or false divisions, and they cause a lot of harm. They create hierarchies. At its core, the ecofeminist argument is that both women and nature are oppressed by a patriarchal ideology, an ideology that fundamentally associates woman with nature and man with culture, and crucially defines culture as inherently superior.
So it's not just a harmless cultural association, like saying Mother Nature. It's actually used as a basis for a system of oppression.
Exactly. You see it manifest in so many ways historically and culturally. In many traditions, the female was viewed as like a lower, more animal form of life than the male. Woman is often associated with childbearing, nurture, domesticity, and therefore seen as closer to nature, which implicitly means less rational, maybe more chaotic, needing control.
And the male.
Conversely, the male gets associated with breadwinning, paid labor, public life, culture, firmly placing him in the realm of reason, order, and control. And nature itself is often framed as feminine. Think Mother Earth, Mother Nature, a fertile wild force that needs to be tamed, controlled by masculine culture or civilization, which is seen as bringing order. Now, while some ecofeminists celebrate women's culturally perceived special closeness to nature, maybe through environmental activism or earth-based spirituality, ecofeminist philosophers are also highly critical of how this closer relationship has been weaponized by patriarchy, used to justify the oppression and domination of both women and nature.
So the argument isn't that women are closer to nature.
No. It's crucial to remember that biologically women are no closer to nature than men. These are social and cultural constructions, and they've been used historically to define roles, limit opportunities, and maintain power structures.
Okay, I see. And how does this manifest in our actual cities, our urban environments? Because the city often feels like the complete opposite of nature, right? A triumph of human culture over the wild.
That's a key point where the ecofeminist lens really brings clarity. One of the most deeply entrenched dichotomies in Western culture is exactly that. Urban versus rural, city versus countryside, civilization versus nature. And this mirrors the gendered oppression perfectly.
How so?
Well, in this way of thinking, nature is seen as out of place in cities. It doesn't belong there naturally. Therefore, it has to be segregated. Think urban parks, gardens, lawns, those strips of grass on boulevards. And then it has to be controlled. We plant it, we prune it, we spray it, we weed it, we manicure it. It's even improved sometimes through introducing non-native species or genetic engineering. As if nature isn't good enough in its wild form and needs human intervention to be truly valuable within a city context.
Okay, so nature in the city is controlled, segregated, and the parallel with women.
The parallel ecofeminist draw is stark. Women are similarly segregated in cities. Think of the historical push towards suburbs for families, or social housing projects often located on the periphery, or the pink ghetto of certain low-wage jobs often clustered in specific areas. And women are controlled by the constant threat of harassment or attack in public spaces, by economic disadvantage, by the pervasive fear that limits their movement, especially at night. They're also improved by societal standards of appearance, grooming, dress, deportment, pressures that are often much stronger for women than for men.
Wow.
The parallels are quite direct. Both women and nature are often deemed messy, maybe irrational, in need of control, and frequently seen as out of place in the dominant masculine urban sphere of business, politics, and public power.
It sounds like ecofeminism is fundamentally about breaking down these rigid categories, these boxes we put things and people into. I remember hearing something about the Greek root oikos being relevant here, like household, ecology, economy. Does that connect to how ecofeminism tries to dismantle these dualisms?
Absolutely. You're hitting on a crucial insight that ties it all together. That etymological root, oikos, the Greek word for household, is the very origin of both ecology and economy.
Huh. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And this ancient root reinforces that traditional association. Women with the home, the household, and by extension, with nature. For centuries, women were largely relegated to the domestic sphere, often seen as managing the household, both literally, cleaning, cooking, childcare, and metaphorically nurturing life, maintaining the immediate environment. Ecofeminism recognizes how these patriarchal constructions were used to marginalize and limit women, keep them confined, their energy untapped in the public sphere. But then it proposes to deconstruct them, to flip the script, essentially, to liberate women's energy and creativity in both natural and built environments. This perspective is uniquely suited to studying cities precisely because it seeks to dismantle the very dualisms like culture-nature, public-private that confine both women and nature.
And those phrases you mentioned earlier.
Right, you often hear ecofeminists talk about healing the wounds, repairing the world, tikkun olam, reweaving the web, or recovering the sacred hoop. These aren't just like poetic metaphors. They're powerful images of reintegrating those false dichotomies of patriarchal thought, blowing together what's been artificially separated. Mind and body, culture and nature, male and female principles in balance.
So the ultimate goal then is to create a more integrated, less fragmented urban experience for everyone, not just women.
Exactly, that's the vision. This leads to what ecofeminists sometimes call domesticating urban space, but not in the sense of taming it or making it boring. Rather, it means making the city feel more like a home, in the best sense of the word, a safe place, an accessible place, a healthy place, not just for women, but for children, for men, for elders, and crucially, for all other living things that share the city with us.
Right.
It's about nurturing the urban environment in a way that truly serves all its inhabitants, holistically. And this concept, this vision, directly informs the Feminist Park project. It transforms the idea of a park from just a segregated green patch into a truly integrated, inclusive, thriving part of the urban fabric. A place where those previously excluded women, marginalized groups, even nature itself can find belonging and benefit.
Okay, we've laid down some pretty powerful theory there, really fundamental critiques. But theory truly comes alive when you see it in action, right? And our sources give us some incredibly vivid snapshots, how these ideas play out in the everyday urban spaces we all inhabit. These aren't just abstract concepts, they're the fabric of our daily lives, and they reveal hidden truths about seemingly ordinary places. Let's start with a place many listeners will know intimately, the suburb.
Indeed. The paper by Carrie Miller, A Feminist Analysis of Lindenwood's Suburb, offers a striking, almost textbook example. It shows how patriarchal design assumptions manifest in everyday life, often in ways that are deeply inconvenient or even unsafe, particularly for women. She describes the suburb as a place apart, geographically isolated, inherently dependent on the city for jobs, culture, many essential services. Yet, ironically, it's become the dominant setting for most middle-class families in North America.
And historically, how did this model develop?
Well, suburbs really took off after World War II in Canada. Influenced by visionary planners, maybe, but ultimately gender-biased ones like Ebenezer Howard, Le Corbusier, Frank Lloyd Wright, and Canadian pioneers like E.G. Faludi and Humphrey Carter, who designed places like Don Mills, Canada's first big planned suburb. What's kind of ironic, maybe even tragic, is that the very problems we associate with suburbs today, like car dependence, lack of amenities, social isolation, they were already being discussed and critiqued even as these places were being built. Yeah. Yet for decades, planners just kept recreating the same inefficient and often exclusionary designs over and over.
And Miller's personal experience in Linden Woods really brings this home, doesn't it? It's one thing to read theory, another to live the impact.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
She recounts this period where she lived without a car in Linden Woods. And the sheer impracticality of the design just became glaringly obvious. She describes having to set aside a full 2 hours just for a round trip to the closest Safeway for groceries.
2 hours for groceries.
Yeah, 30 minutes to walk there empty-handed, and then an arduous 45 minutes back, hauling a full knapsack and multiple shopping bags. She explicitly states that for someone with children, this seemingly simple task would have been impossible. It literally meant structuring her whole day around one single burdensome chore. More alarmingly, she describes feeling like a prisoner in her own home because of this car dependence. And when she did try to go for a walk at night, she feared for her safety because the streets were utterly deserted, empty. This personal story really underscores how urban design isn't just about how things look. It impacts independence, time, personal security, very immediately.
So beyond her personal story, what were the specific design failures she identified from that feminist lens?
Miller found several deeply ingrained issues. For one, Linden Woods shows severe homogeneity and segregation. The development company, Genstar, had exclusive control over every aspect of the design. So virtually every house looked the same, conformed to their singular vision. It stifled individuality, community diversity.
And economic segregation, too.
Absolutely. This also meant rigid economic segregation. Only high-income families could afford to live there. Furthermore, apartments and seniors' residences, they were pushed to the very edge of the neighborhood instead of being integrated within. which is a massive missed opportunity for what urbanists call natural surveillance.
Eyes on the street.
Exactly. Think about it. Seniors are often home during the day. If parks and schools were located closer, if streets were more active, their presence could provide a constant source of eyes on the street, enhancing safety, fostering community interaction. But they were pushed out.
And the strict zoning you often see in suburbs, residential completely separate from commercial, how did that play out?
That was another major issue she flagged. The area was strictly zoned for residential buildings only, explicitly prohibiting any commercial or retail stores within the core neighborhood. Now, this policy, maybe intended to preserve a quiet residential feel, directly led to deserted and dead streets during the daytime when most residents were away at work.
Right, no reason to be out and about.
Precisely. If there was a diversity of uses, small shops, cafes, local services, people would be using streets and facilities at different times for different reasons, naturally creating surveillance, a more vibrant, safer environment. She also points out the glaring absence of essential services, like a daycare, within the community itself.
In a family neighborhood.
Yeah. Given the number of families with working parents, you'd think that would be a fundamental priority. Instead, it illustrates a design that inherently assumes women stay home, forcing working parents, mostly mothers, to commute extra time, adding stress, adding expense, just to drop off their kids before heading to work.
What about walkability and public transit, which are so crucial for many people, especially women who might not have constant car access?
Linden Woods scored poorly there too, really reinforcing car dependence. Streets were simply not designed to promote walking. The distance from most houses to the neighborhood center, marked by those artificial lakes, could easily take 20 minutes walking, far exceeding the recommended quarter-mile or 5-minute walk radius for walkable communities.
And sidewalks.
Shockingly, no sidewalks on residential roads, forcing pedestrians onto the street, significantly increasing their risk. Even the walking paths around the lakes, which were a feature, weren't directly accessible by sidewalks from within the neighborhood, meaning you'd practically have to drive to the park just to take a walk.
That's absurd.
It really is. Public transit was also highly restricted. Bus routes primarily operated only during morning and evening rush hours, clearly designed for downtown commuters, not for the diverse travel needs of women running errands during the day or accessing services, or for seniors who often lack vehicles. The curvy street layout often caused backtracking, making walking distances to bus stops feel even longer. And to compound the problem, long waits at bus stops, often without shelters, which just tempts people to give up on transit altogether.
And she mentioned fences. Intuitively, you'd think fences enhance safety, but she argued the opposite.
That's the paradox she pointed out. The entire Linden Woods neighborhood was enclosed by fences, creating only 3 main ways in or out. While this might be intended for security, Miller argues it severely limited escape routes and could actually reduce safety. For instance, if someone tried to pull you into a car on a main road bordering the neighborhood, there would literally be nowhere to run or hide behind you, just fences. Lastly, Miller critiqued the thoughtless placement of public facilities, schools, parks, located too far for walking, again, leading to car dependence, reducing vital community interaction. And what's truly astounding here is her specific safety concern with the retention lakes located near schools. She noted seeing children playing on the ice, despite these being retention ponds, which can have warmer water underneath, making them prone to cracking. Extremely dangerous. The idea of placing these near schools without adequate fencing or clear warnings was, to her, unbelievable. Just irresponsible planning.
So Miller's conclusion about Linden Woods really encapsulates that broader argument, doesn't it? That patriarchal urban planning creates inefficient and inequitable environments.
Yes, she argues forcefully that current planning practices, historically dominated by men, are fundamentally inefficient. They fail to meet the complex, diverse needs of contemporary communities. She strongly advocates for a paradigm shift, calling for the explicit incorporation of feminist values, diversity, accessibility, safety, ecological sustainability into the planning and design of future neighborhoods. It's a call to build places that genuinely serve everyone.
That paints a vivid and pretty concerning picture of suburban challenges. Now, let's zoom in even further. From the sprawling suburb to a very specific urban street, Pamela Jarvis's analysis of Cavalier Drive really makes you look at the seemingly mundane details of everyday spaces differently, reveals hidden biases.
Jarvis's paper, An Analysis of an Urban Street from a Feminist Perspective, is incredibly insightful. It reveals how even the basic design of a street can subtly and sometimes overtly disadvantage women and reinforce traditional societal roles. She immediately points out the street's excessive length, about 1.9 kilometers. That's roughly a 30-minute walk end-to-end for an average pedestrian.
That's quite long for a single street.
It is. And for an elderly person or a shopper loaded with groceries or a parent navigating with kids, it could easily take twice as long. Most often, these individuals are women. And this excessive travel time directly impinges on their ability to get other things done, affecting their work lives or the families depending on them. It also contributes to a sense of isolation. As the great urbanist Jane Jacobs observed, if a street is too long and lacks diverse activities, people can become isolated. They don't encounter different people, different views. They don't feel truly connected to their community.
So it's not just about getting from A to B, it's the entire experience of that journey and how it impacts your day, your sense of connection. What about safety for pedestrians, especially with a street that long?
That's a critical concern, and Jarvis found it profoundly lacking. She notes the inadequacy of pedestrian crossings. Along the entire 1.9 kilometers of Cavalier Drive, only a few poorly placed crosswalks.
Only a few.
Yeah. This scarcity often forces people to jaywalk, creating inherently unsafe conditions for everyone, but particularly for those with limited mobility or children. And this raises an important, yet often overlooked, question. Have you ever really looked at the image on standard pedestrian crossing signs?
The little walking person.
Exactly. Jarvis points out they almost universally depict a male figure. She argues this subtly reinforces male dominance, presenting the male as the normative, the default figure, implicitly dictating to women when and where they may do something. She suggests a gender-neutral symbol, like a simple X for cross, would be far more inclusive and appropriate.
That's a detail you might walk past every single day for years and never consciously notice. But it speaks volumes about who is seen as the default citizen, doesn't it?
It really does. And what's truly fascinating here is how Jarvis, drawing on the work of Leslie Keynes-Weisman, argues that the street's very layout reflects society's gendered spatial coordinates.
Gendered spatial coordinates, what does that mean?
In Western thought, top, right front, associated with public life, business, rationality, are subconsciously linked to male. While bottom, left, back, associated with residential, home, emotion, are linked to female.
Okay.
On Cavalier Drive, you see this in practice. The top front of the street features a strip mall, a national bank fitting the public, business sphere traditionally associated with men. As you move further down the street, residential areas become dominant, the traditional location for women in that binary. Even the street shapes play a role. Straight, hard patterns characterize the business areas, while curved, soft patterns define the residential areas, transmitting subtle yet powerful sexist messages that reinforce cultural stereotypes about where men and women belong and what they should be doing.
Wow. And what about the types of businesses available and the public transport infrastructure? How do they play into this gendered landscape?
Jarvis found significant problems there, too. Despite the area being highly residential, with many families, a problematic lack of daycares, making it incredibly difficult for working women to access essential childcare nearby. Banks mostly open only during typical daytime business hours. Inaccessible for many women who might not have personal transport during those hours or who work shifts. She also observed a small grocery store on Cavalier Drive, which, while superficially convenient, had inflated pricing, precisely because it was the only readily accessible option for pedestrians, effectively exploiting their lack of transportation alternatives.
Right.
And consider this, a gas station was inappropriately placed directly across from an apartment complex, causing constant noise, fumes, potential health risks, issues often of primary concern to nurturing women, traditionally tasked with worrying about family health.
And public transit, often a lifeline, as you said, for women and other marginalized groups.
Transportation is a major concern for women, statistically less likely to have car access, more reliant on transit. Jarvis noted that while bus routes seemed adequate during peak commuter times, service dropped off significantly in between, often ceasing early in the evening. This disproportionately stresses women, who are more reliant on transit for their complex, multi-stop trips. They often feel, as Margaret Eichler put it, trapped on the transit system, having to meticulously schedule their entire days around unreliable bus schedules, which adds immense stress, limits their autonomy.
And sidewalks, such a basic amenity, seems simple but also problematic. It sounds like no detail was too small for Jarvis's analysis.
Absolutely. The sidewalks along Cavalier Drive were fragmented, especially on the right-hand side, broken up by burgeoning streets and business entrances. This compromises safety. Pedestrians can easily get entangled with traffic. Even more concerning, where the sidewalk met the street crossing. 6-inch drops instead of leveling off smoothly, posing significant safety and accessibility challenges for the elderly, women with strollers, wheelchair users.
6 inches, that's huge.
It's a major barrier. These seemingly small flaws often led people to avoid the sidewalks altogether, pushing them onto the less safe street. Finally, the street fundamentally lacked a sense of safety and social contact. Minimal interaction among users, especially at night. One end of the street was what Jane Jacobs famously called a border vacuum, an area lined by railroad tracks, sparse lighting, creating blank spaces of darkness that effectively welcome crime.
Oh.
This was particularly concerning for women in the residential areas at that end, leading to pervasive fears for their safety, their security, even within their own homes, fundamentally eroding their sense of peace in their own neighborhood.
So Jarvis's work really underscores it. Urban design isn't neutral. It actively impedes women's equality, limits their freedom.
It does. She concludes that urban design, as it often stands, largely overlooks women's fundamental needs for spiritual, social, physical space. It actively reinforces sexist roles, dominant roles for men. Her call to action is clear, resonant. Women need to become actively involved in urban planning decisions. She argues that if we merely stand by, allow these designs to continue, we tacitly condone them. We submit to the roles society has delegated, inadvertently contributing to our own inequality, our marginalization. It's a powerful call to agency.
This shows how deeply ingrained these issues are. In suburbs, on everyday streets, what about downtown areas, where you might expect more vigilance, more diverse public spaces, given the higher density, the public visibility? Do these same patterns persist there?
That's a great question. Michelle Kirkbride's eco-feminist analysis of Graham Avenue offers incredibly insightful observations from downtown Winnipeg. It demonstrates that even in a bustling city center, underlying patriarchal structures can still manifest. Kirkbride found Graham Avenue relatively safe, but notably dull.
Safe but dull.
Yeah. While it had some positive safety features, good lighting, wide, short alleys that reduced hiding spots, it became utterly isolated after business hours. Few public spaces open, few public telephones for emergencies back then. She observed, there was simply nothing to do after business hours, so the street is avoided. It effectively became a ghost town at night. The tall buildings, while providing a sense of enclosure, also often obscured sightlines, creating other kinds of safety challenges.
And how did she see women and nature fitting into this downtown landscape? Were they integrated or still relegated to symbolic roles?
What's truly fascinating here is how she observed women appearing in very traditional, often subordinate roles, predominantly cashiers in department stores, secretaries in office buildings. The 3 bridal shops on Graham Avenue, for instance, featured mannequins that were all remarkably thin, reinforcing a narrow, idealized beauty standard for women, promoting that traditional heteronormative role of the bride.
And nature.
Nature, too, was relegated to a trophy role. Kirkbride noted a few frail and small trees along the sidewalk, which she directly paralleled to the frail and small mannequins in the store windows. She argued this created a powerful, subtle impression that men could control the role they wanted women and nature to play in their surroundings, keeping both in a subordinate, carefully managed position, rather than allowing them to thrive organically, naturally.
So even in a busy downtown, the underlying issues persist, just maybe in more subtle forms sometimes. Did she offer any concrete solutions for Graham Avenue, drawing from her ecofeminist perspective?
Yes, she did. Kirkbride suggested practical improvements that align perfectly with the goals of the Feminist Park project. For example, she proposed transforming at least one of the many existing parking lots into a small public park. This wouldn't just be about aesthetics. It would bring more people onto the street, enhancing safety through increased natural surveillance, creating a livelier atmosphere, even helping absorb vehicle emissions, provide much-needed oxygen in a dense urban core. She also suggested adding residential buildings to attract different types of people, provide a reason to use the street after office hours. This would explicitly make the street more welcoming, more functional for women and families, alleviating some of its current dullness, transforming it into a vibrant 24-hour space. Her analysis clearly demonstrates a path forward, a way to integrate feminist and ecological principles into urban design that truly benefits everyone.
Okay, so if we step back and look at the bigger picture, it's not just about what's physically missing in our urban spaces, or even what's subtly flawed in their design. It's also about how deeper underlying patriarchal values influence everything, from the grand vision of a city down to the smallest details of park design, and even our personal interactions within these spaces.
Absolutely. Karen Paquin's Ecofeminism in Urban Parks really dives into the philosophical underpinnings of all this. She argues that parks, despite often seeming inherently beneficial, being an integral part of any city, they're deeply influenced by a dominant male ideology, an ideology that views the oppression of women and nature as almost givens in our society. She even describes parks as outdoor test tubes, where non-human life forms are shaped, molded, forced to grow in highly structured ways, almost like scientific experiment.
Outdoor test tubes, that's a strong image.
It is. Think of intensely pruned trees, perfectly manicured lawns, carefully selected species in flower beds, arranged just so. This level of intense control over nature, Paquin argues, directly parallels the control and management exerted over women in society.
That's a powerful and, yes, somewhat unsettling analogy. How does she connect this idea of control in parks to the broader concept of gender and scientific rationality?
Paquin argues that the very habit of mind we've inherited in Western civilization is fundamentally gendered. Masculine values aggression, hierarchical decision-making, cold, detached, rational thinking, the supreme importance of culture and human ingenuity, these are highly valued. Conversely, feminine values, passivity, inclusion, emotion, deep respect for nature are often deemed ineffective, or even detrimental to progress. Scientific rationality itself, based on linear, dichotomized thought patterns that divide reality into those rigid dualisms, man-woman, man-culture versus nature, emotion versus reason, reinforces these patriarchal binaries. She contends this approach has had disastrous consequences by isolating aspects of nature from their broader ecological context.
Like what?
Like introducing exotic species without fully considering their impact on native ones. We're constantly fighting natural processes like ecological succession, leading to imbalance. It mirrors the way women's roles or contributions have often been isolated, devalued, seen outside the mainstream of patriarchal culture.
And this all ties back to that core ecofeminist belief you described earlier, that the oppression of women and nature are intrinsically linked. Can't separate them.
Precisely. For Paquin, the core ecofeminist argument is unequivocal. Ending the oppression of women is intrinsically linked with ending the oppression of nature. You cannot achieve one without the other. She highlights that pervasive cultural association of women with nature and how this connection has historically reinforced women's inferior position, defining them as wild, irrational, needing male control. To illustrate how patriarchy maintains this dominance, Paquin applies Mary Daly's incisive framework, the methods of the fathers, directly to cities and parks.
Okay, Mary Daly's methods of the fathers. That raises an important question. How exactly does patriarchy maintain dominance in urban settings using these methods? Can you break down Daly's framework with urban examples from Paquin?
Of course. Paquin applies Daly's 4 methods directly to our urban environments. The first method is the erasure of women. In cities, this is evident in the very physical divisions of urban layouts, like the ideal home being in the suburbs, far from the central business core, implicitly defining women's spheres domestic, separate from public power. More acutely, it's seen in the pervasive fear and violence women face in public spaces. Paquin cites those alarming statistics. In Canada, 1 in 4 women will be sexually assaulted in their lifetime. Over half are afraid to walk in their neighborhoods after dark.
That's staggering.
It is. And parks, often with poor lighting, dense foliage offering plentiful hiding spots, isolated pathways, they become particularly vulnerable areas for women, contributing directly to this erasure from freely using public life, especially after dark. The second method is reversal. Paquin explains how in cities, the survival of trees and wildlife often depends entirely on human intervention. Think of urban trees that need to be engineered to grow in those constricted concrete spaces, or carefully managed populations of urban wildlife. This intense, controlling intervention over nature, she argues, directly parallels how men have historically engineered women's spaces within the city, creating an illusion of benevolence or necessity, while actually asserting dominance and control.
Like saying, we're letting you have the space, but only on our terms.
Exactly. It's a subtle but powerful way of maintaining control. The third method is false polarization. This is the classic man against nature battle, visibly played out in our constant, often aggressive fight against weeds and pests in urban green spaces, or the obsession with perfectly manicured lawns that demand chemical intervention. Instead of working with nature, understanding its cycles, allowing for coexistence, we fight against it. Even though our own survival is intrinsically linked to healthy ecosystems, this mindset perpetuates the idea that humanity is separate from and superior to the natural world. And the fourth method, divide and conquer, is where it gets really interesting, I think. Paquin points out how women who do manage to obtain positions on city councils or within city bureaucracies often have to function within male-defined systems. They effectively have to become one of the boys to succeed.
So their perspectives get diluted.
Their feminist perspectives can be diluted or co-opted by the system. Furthermore, she critiques seemingly well-meaning programs, like offering free Wendu self-defense classes in parks, maybe run by the city. While practical on the surface, potentially empowering for individuals. These programs can implicitly suggest that violence against women is just a normal, inevitable part of urban life, rather than addressing the root causes. Male aggression, systemic misogyny. It's a short-term compromise that doesn't fundamentally challenge the patriarchal system that creates the need for such classes in the first place.
And she also critiques the very concept of parks as a kind of paradise. That's quite provocative, given how universally cherished urban parks often are.
Indeed. Paquin explains the deep Judeo-Christian influence here, where parks are often seen as an attempt to recreate a Garden of Eden, implying an inherent desire for order, control over nature, a domesticated, human-defined paradise. She uses Mary Daly's scathing critique. Daly calls them the patriarchal pleasure park to describe many urban parks.
Patriarchal pleasure park.
Yeah. Daly describes them as game preserves, where nature and women are domesticated, preserved, and chillingly considered fair game for predatory owners or users. This highlights the profound vulnerability of women in these supposedly tranquil spaces, especially after dark, where the very design elements that make them beautiful, the trees, the bushes, the winding paths, can also create secluded areas perfect for crime. It's a powerful image that strips away the veneer of innocence from urban parks, revealing them as spaces where power dynamics are subtly yet forcefully enacted.
So what's the path forward then from this deeply critical ecofeminist perspective? What does Paquin propose as a genuine solution, beyond just Band-Aid fixes like better lighting?
Paquin argues that superficial changes are nowhere near enough. While better lighting or self-defense classes are practical, short-term compromises, maybe making parks more hospitable in the interim, true safety, true liberation requires radically undermining those deeply entrenched patriarchal values. The view of nature must fundamentally shift from something to be contained within park boundaries, controlled, to an intrinsic, integrated part of daily life, everywhere. She advocates for what she calls cosmic spinning, rather than containment within walls, a radical reorientation that recognizes nature as vital to our own survival, ends the masculinist division of man against nature. This profound shift in mindset, she believes, is essential to ending both nature's and women's oppression. It's of designing with nature, not over it. And in doing so, creating spaces that are inherently more equitable, more nurturing for absolutely all beings.
That's a really powerful, deeply analytical perspective, truly challenging the very foundations of how we think about urban design. But to truly grasp these sometimes abstract concepts, sometimes you need to live it, right? To experience the reality on the ground. And Richard Lupu, a male student, did just that in his paper, A Feminist Analysis of Polo Park Shopping Center, offering an extraordinary first-person account.
Lupu's experiential account is, quite daring and profoundly insightful. As a man, he admitted that while he had intellectually grasped feminist issues, they just did not hit home in a visceral, lived way. So he embarked on this bold, female-for-a-day experiment, dressing as a woman to observe firsthand how women are treated in a patriarchal society, what's implicitly expected of them. He meticulously described his metamorphosis into a woman as incredibly time-consuming, often frustrating. It took hours of shopping just to find appropriate clothes. He quickly realized the shocking impracticality of women's appearances when he couldn't even find shoes in his size that were both stylish and comfortable, an impossible task. The lengthy, meticulous process of applying makeup, doing his hair, matching attire, it was extensive, leading to his profound epiphany about the immense societal pressure for women to be thin and attractive, for, as he put it starkly, the patriarch. It was a complete reorientation of his daily routine, his sense of self in public.
I can only imagine that was incredibly eye-opening, not just physically putting on the clothes, but psychologically too. What was the immediate feedback once he stepped out, started walking around as a woman?
What's truly striking here is his female friend's immediate, almost unconscious feedback. She just said, "You're walking like a man."
Wow. Just like that.
Just like that. He was utterly astonished by this simple observation. It forced him to realize that men often subconsciously take up more space when they walk. They move with a sense of invincibility, he called it. A confidence that, he realized, reflects their patriarchal privilege. It often makes them less concerned with safety in public spaces. In stark contrast, he learned that a woman's walk often reflects a constant, ingrained concern for personal safety, perceived vulnerability, a subtle modification of gait, of posture, born from a lifetime of awareness of scanning the environment.
Right.
This firsthand experience shed powerful light on why men often don't truly grasp the depth or pervasiveness of women's safety concerns, because they simply don't have to navigate the world with that same underlying current of apprehension day in, day out.
And the mall itself, Polo Park Shopping Center, how did that serve as a microcosm of these broader societal expectations, these gendered norms?
In several insidious ways, according to his observations. In terms of clothing and body image, he struggled immensely to find unappealing or even moderately larger sizes in a major department store like Zeller's, a stark contrast with a readily available diverse range of men's clothing. He observed thin, half-naked models on display everywhere, a jarring visual contrast to the fully clothed, often more varied male mannequins. The very name of one store, Mannequin Store, implicitly suggested how women's bodies should be shaped, reinforcing an unattainable narrow ideal. The pervasive focus on cosmetics, like in the milieu store, presented makeup as an art for women, highlighting the immense pressure on their appearance as if it were a crucial skill to master just for public presentation. He also found distinct gendered domains within the mall. The supermarket's fresh and fancy flower department, with its dainty title, clearly geared towards women. Conversely, the sports store, overwhelmingly male-oriented. The small women's clothing section was stereotypical, focusing almost exclusively on aerobics and tanning attire, like spandex and bathing suits, rather than diverse activewear for various sports. Lupu noted the common, dismissive phrase, "you play like a girl," and the significant investment of male bigwigs in male-dominated sports. Reinforcing these gender divisions, implying serious athleticism, belonged primarily to men. He even observed universal accessibility issues, like a surprising lack of wheelchair accessibility in a pet store. He astutely connected this to the broader feminist struggle for equal rights, showing how exclusionary design impacts all marginalized groups, not just women.
And even in seemingly innocuous places like novelty shops, he found subtle but powerful gendered messages.
Yes, Lupu found examples even there. He saw a shirt in a novelty shop that was clearly against sexual expectations, which he interpreted as women publicly taking a stand, reclaiming their autonomy. Conversely, another shirt promoting bigger is better in the context of male competition for women's attention, typified for him how men exploit themselves in order to exploit women's sexuality. These seemingly small details just underscored the pervasive nature of gendered messaging, subtly conditioning how we view ourselves and others.
But the most striking example, it sounds like, came from outside the mall, where he confronted overt systemic patriarchy head-on.
Absolutely. To observe how women are treated in a much more overtly patriarchal institution, Lupu and his friend Lori, acting as his daughter for the experiment, decided to visit a car dealership.
Oh boy.
Yeah. What happened next was infuriatingly predictable, based on what women report all the time. They waited 20 minutes, completely ignored by salesmen. Salesmen who immediately approached male customers, treating them with respect, assuming they were knowledgeable and serious buyers. When they finally managed to get a salesman's attention, he was immediately condescending, asserting that Lori wasn't looking for the higher-powered male car, the GT model, but rather the safer female-type car, the LX.
Yeah, he just assumed.
Totally assumed. He listed only safety features for them, while for male customers, he'd immediately pop the hood, discuss engine specs, treat them as equals in a technical conversation. This was a profound, first-hand illustration of systemic disrespect, woven into everyday commercial interactions. It's a blatant prejudice.
And his most profound takeaway, the real aha moment, came from an unexpected place, didn't it? Not the mall, not the dealership.
It did. Lupu's most profound epiphany came from a seemingly unrelated scene in the movie Dolores Claiborne. In the film, there's a scene where a female banker completely disregards Dolores' account ownership, prioritizing her abusive husband's request because, wait for it, standard bank procedure.
Standard procedure.
A male-defined system implicitly favoring the husband. Dolores' exasperated, heartbreaking question in that scene, "It's because I'm a woman, isn't it?"
Big.
Lupu wrote that it made him feel a big chill creep up and down his spine. This wasn't about a park or a street. It brought home the insidious nature of gendered inequality, even in seemingly neutral institutions like banks, showing how deeply embedded, how pervasive it is in every facet of society. It was the moment for him that the intellectual understanding truly became a gut-level realization. What it actually feels like to be a woman navigating a world often not built for you, or even actively hostile.
So what does all this mean for you, the listener? As you navigate your own urban environment every single day, it means that our built environment, the streets, the parks, the buildings, it's far from neutral. It actively shapes our experiences, often subtly but powerfully, reinforcing inequalities that have deep historical roots, deep patriarchal roots, from the layout of our suburbs to the unspoken messages on our street signs, even the managed nature of our parks. Our cities are constantly communicating, constantly shaping our realities. But understanding this, seeing it, that's the crucial first step towards change. It allows us to see the invisible structures, right? To question the unquestioned assumptions, and to begin to imagine something different. This deep dive into the very concept of the Feminist Park podcast and the research informing it has shown us just how deeply embedded gender and power dynamics really are in the design, in the experience of our urban spaces. From the inaccessible suburbs that can literally trap residents, to the subtly sexist street signs normalizing male dominance, and the literally engineered parks designed to control nature rather than coexist with it. Our cities fundamentally reflect a history built largely by men, for men.
And we've seen through the sharp analysis of various researchers, and even that profound firsthand account from Richard Lupu, how these designs create tangible disadvantages for women, impacting their safety, their mobility, their access to essential services, even their perceived place and value in society. The mission of the Feminist Park Project, to conceptualize, potentially create, a truly intersectional, equitable green space. It's not just idealistic. It's a critical, necessary response to these pervasive issues. It seeks to, as we heard earlier, heal the wounds of patriarchal design, fundamentally reintegrate human and non-human life in a way that truly benefits everyone. It challenges the very habit of mind, those dualisms, those exclusionary practices.
And recognizing these issues, as you said earlier, isn't just about pointing out problems. It's about the immense, exciting opportunities that arise when we address this gap. When we build with intention, when we question these old assumptions, we can fundamentally rethink urban design. We can reclaim public spaces, transform them to be truly welcoming, safe, functional for all. This leads directly to optimizing public health for entire communities, fostering genuinely inclusive environments where everyone feels a sense of belonging.
Exactly.
It's a pursuit that extends far beyond just fairness. It's about broader societal benefit, leveraging feminist and eco-feminist values, diversity, accessibility, safety, ecological sustainability to build better cities for everyone. That true cosmic spinning, as Apakian called it, rather than mere containment.
Which really raises an important question for you, the listener. As someone who inhabits these spaces every day, someone whose experience is constantly shaped by them, what would your ideal urban green space look like? If you could reimagine a park, a street, a whole neighborhood from the ground up with all these insights we've discussed, what would be your priorities? How can we collectively challenge these old assumptions, build environments that truly serve all of us, rather than just a select few by default?
And that's absolutely not a rhetorical question. The Feminist Park Project is actively seeking input on this very question right now. If you've been listening today and you felt a spark of recognition, maybe some frustration, or a desire for change in your own environment, they truly want to hear from you. We strongly encourage you to seek out and fill in the survey from the Feminist Park Project. Share what kind of green urban space you would like to construct. What features matter most to you? What would make you feel truly safe, truly welcome, truly able to thrive in public space?
Your insights are absolutely essential.
They really are essential to building a truly radical, equitable, and ultimately more humane future for all our cities.
This knowledge is a tool, really. A tool for seeing your city differently, and potentially for helping to change it.
It's been a really insightful deep dive, I think. This document provides such a vital framework, especially for projects like the Feminist Park Project that are trying to build something fundamentally different. It shows just how interlinked urban design and social justice are.
It really does. But it also shows the scale of the challenge, right? It requires sustained effort, real commitment, and a genuine willingness to shift power dynamics in how cities get made and managed.
Definitely. It makes you think about how we ensure those voices, the ones that have been excluded, are actually heard and centered.
There's another quote from Sarah Ahmed in the handbook that feels relevant here.
Go on.
She says, "If you have to shout to be heard, you are heard as shouting."
That's powerful.
It makes you ponder, doesn't it? How can the design of public space itself work differently? How can it amplify the voices of those who've been historically silenced, ensuring their needs are met without them having to shout just to be noticed?
How can design itself listen? That's a really provocative thought to end on.
A lot to think about.
Indeed. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.